Security is not only about tactics and strategy, it's also about making the right move at the right time. What should be the next move? Tonight, data scientist and information consultant Babajide Ogusowo is here to share insights on the state of peace in Nigeria. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
And a lovely show you had earlier, just before the news at 10. You were talking to one of the military generals who had been in the army for nearly 40 years and sharing insights with him. So the military has renamed Operation Lafia Dole Adinkal, I believe. It's also launched new operations in the southeastern part of the country. A change of tactics, would you say?
A change of tactics, but what's more important is what Nigerians want, and that's a change of results. Exactly on this day, May 9th, 1960, the world produced the first commercial birth control pill, NOV-10. Tonight isn't about birth control pills. Tonight is for us to discuss if there's a pill for national security. What will that pill look like? And I'll share a bit of what we should be producing tonight. But first, there's good news and bad news. So perhaps we should start with the bad news.
Let's hear some good news. We've been reading bad news all evening.
Okay, so if we're going to start with the good news, here's the good news. There are top 3 good news that we currently face today. Now, the first is, yes, there are challenges, but let's look at the biggest good news we have, the first of 3 good news, and that is that we see a lot of improved coordination between the Nigerian Army and the Air Force. Prior to this new military chiefs, we had seen that there wasn't so much synergy between the Army and the Air Force. What we see right now is improved synergy, and that's some good news. What we also see is that based on this synergy, they are making incursions into territories that the enemy holds. The second good news is we see improved military presence in the camps of the internally displaced people. So we see the military providing improved security to women and children. And not only that, Amarachi, the evidence we have now is even the armed men, the soldiers, are also bonding better with those they are protecting in the camps. So yes, the first is news of improved coordination between the army and the military. Second is improved bonding and protection for women and children in the IDP camps. But what we see as well is we've seen the Chief of Defense Staff take on another role, Chief of Motivation Staff. In his first 100 days, he's led armed forces and he's visited all the zones. Visited, from the last count, 11 states, and he's also visited Niger. He's visited President Idris Deby before he was killed in Chad, and he also visited Cameroon. So in all, yes, we've seen good news from the new leaders of the military. But we can't talk about good news without talking about the bad news. Now, the bad news, the top 3 bad news we still face today. 1, higher frequency of crime. 2, the reward for committing crime now is rising faster than the risk. And so we see more people committing crime. Right. And finally is, yes, we are fighting terrorism, but yet we are still not sufficiently fighting the causes of terrorism. And so if we look at the top 3 good news we face in the country today, and we put it by side with the top 3 bad news. In summary, I think there's the good news still outweighs the bad news. What we now need to do is what you've talked about. We need to review our operations and review the sort of strategies that will be used going forward to make every Nigerian life safe again.
Yeah, and you're talking about insurgency and all the efforts being put by the military, the coordination between the military and the Air Force, but there's still, all these other branches of crime that seem to be coming up from insurgency, which is really sad. But even now, there's also talk about funding, the fight against terrorism, and in some quarters it is believed that this fight is being overfunded. So is there a strong case, for more funds?
We need to look at the facts, Amarachi. This week we saw that big number that over the years, over 10 trillion naira has been used to fund the war against terrorism. But that is the reason why we have this challenge. Only 10 trillion naira, and I emphasize only 10 trillion naira, has been used to fund the fight against terrorism.
You said it's not enough?
Significantly underfunded. And the best way to understand it is to look at the global powers, the countries that are rated as the most secure in the world. How much do they spend on their military? Because that allows us to understand how much we still need to spend in investing. Yes, make no mistakes, we need to, there has to be transparency and accountability. But if you take a look at, for instance, the first country that spends the highest in the world, last year, the United States spent $778 billion on its military. China spent over $250 billion last year alone on its military. India, over $70 billion on the military. How much did Nigeria spend on its military last year? Only $2.6 billion. Now, these are big numbers, but let me explain and let me tell you what exactly this means. What the United States spends on its military per day is what Nigeria spends on its military per annum. I hope you heard me clearly.
Yeah, I did.
And that is the challenge we face today. Yes, we talk about the big number, 10 trillion naira, but how much is 10 trillion naira? What we should focus on is how much impact will 10 trillion naira give a fight against terrorism. And looking at global standards, 10 trillion naira is significant on the funding. So we need to have more money, but we also need to have more accountability.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if you're also considering, that, many analysts now have said you need a multilateral approach to fighting insurgency. Apart from buying weapons and, going out, providing weapons for the military to fight, you also need to provide developments, infrastructure, for these places that are being taken over and being disturbed by insurgency.
And I can agree more with you. And that's exactly even what other African countries are doing. Investing, but these investments require funds, and they've tried to, other countries have tried to look at creative ways, especially in Africa, to finance their military. So yes, looking at it from the world perspective is one way, but looking at it even from the African perspective lets you understand that even that shows a lot of underfunding. Algeria has a population of less than 50 million people. Last year, it invested approximately $10 billion in its military. Nigeria, less than $3 billion. Morocco, a country with less than 50 million people, last year invested approximately $5 billion in its military. Nigeria, less than $3 billion. South Africa, a country less than 60 million people, last year invested over $3 billion in its military. Nigeria, less than $3 billion. Why is this important? All these countries have, one, significantly lower population than Nigeria. Two, they're not fighting the sort of war that Nigeria is fighting. And three, Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa, so it has more at stake. Again, I re-emphasize, it is significantly important for us to fund the military more, but we also need to ensure that we do more on accountability.
Well, that's a really nice place to put it.
Wait, just wait a minute. In the final analysis, let's not forget, when spiders unite, they can tie down a lion.
Your grandfather's proverb, perhaps?
Perhaps. Pleasure is all mine, Amarachi.
Thanks again, Babajide. Pleasure having you here.